Our topic today is bone broth and the benefits of bone broth. What we know about bone broth is that like supports like. And what I mean by that is that the healthful benefits of bone broth come from the many important elements in the bones. So, just a few of those things are, for example, we get electrolyte minerals, we get amino acids, we get bone marrow, and we also get gelatin and collagen from the cartilage-rich bones. The bone broth is also very easy for people to digest and it's soothing to the gut. It's one of my favorite things to recommend to somebody that has a leaky gut. And finally, people from around the world for centuries noticed the therapeutic effects from consuming a very gelatin-rich bone broth daily, including, for example, support for the bones, support for your joints and muscles, and just a general improvement in well-being. If you look at the history of the use of bone broth, you will see people talking about its curative value for things like cancers and blood disorders. Again, I find it to be incredibly helpful for someone who is having gut issues and or for someone who is trying to manage their weight. I also recommend it for my anorexic patients who are desperately trying to begin to incorporate real food. It's a very calming way to reintroduce and feel safe with foods again. So, that said, let's get started. All right, so we are going to do some bone broth. And before we start, let me just say that you can't do anything better for yourself, in particular if you suffer from leaky gut. But even if you don't and you'd like to prevent having a leaky gut, bone broth is simply one of the healthiest things that you can do for your gut. In addition to which, it's delicious. I use it for so many of my recipes. It is incredibly good in terms of restoring vitamins and minerals that the body needs. So what you're looking at right now is the very beginning of a pot of bone broth. And you can see the bones and just some big chunks of onions in these two first pictures. In this next picture, you can see the bone broth with the carrots, onions, and celery. So now you can see a little bit more of what it looks like. And then in the picture after that, you can see a couple of the small bones. I like to use small bones better than the big bones, although I have used both. And in this particular pot, I will have both sizes. But the small ones are just better because you get the marrow out of them more quickly. That said, the large ones are also good because you can keep using them over and over again. So in this shot, you can see that I have a small bone there to the left, and then you can see two of the really big bones. You can also see how the top of the broth is beginning to get a little scummy looking. And then there's a close-up. You can see all the really good fat that's forming on the top of the broth. In this picture, you can see how brown it looks on top, and this gives you sort of a good idea of all the scum. I call it scum, that's probably not the right word, that's in the broth. And then in the picture after that, you can see now that I am beginning to skim that off. I've got that little strainer, and I'm just beginning to skim that off. And there's another close-up of it. Now, in the picture that you're looking at, you can see that it's just the bone broth without the scum on top. I've skinned it all off, and it looks pretty good. In the picture that follows, it looks a little crazy because now I've got all of these herbs. I decided to add some of my favorite herbs to the broth. It's been cooking now for a couple of days, and also that big thing in the left front is a roast, which looks kind of pink and weird, but it's going to taste really good later. And then there's another picture of the broth with all of the herbs in it that haven't quite cooked yet. Finally, this last picture is a bowl of beef with the carrots from the bone broth and some peas that I've added. I don't know if you can tell how delicious this beef is just from looking at the picture, but I can assure you it is so delicious. It's hard to stay away from it. I snack on it all day long, cold or hot. It doesn't matter. It's absolutely scrumptious. So you definitely want to try that.